Hey guys, Philip here. It is Monday, which means it's time for another Interim Monday show. So I've talked about bourbon, rye whiskey, the Bottle and Bond Act. Might as well talk about corn whiskey. Now, I've talked about rye whiskey previously, and so I'm sure you're thinking, I know exactly how corn whiskey is made. At least 51% corn. Distilled at no more than 190 degrees proof. Uh, Stored in a new charred oak barrel for no less than or no more than 125 degrees proof. And you've got corn whiskey. Nope, you've got bourbon, because those are the regulations for bourbon. Corn whiskey, and sort of an interesting twist, is separate from wheat or rye whiskey in that in order to be considered corn whiskey, it's got to be at least 81% corn. But there's no regulation on what sort of cask you can use. So you can age your corn whiskey in a used bourbon barrel, or a wine barrel, or if you're feeling really weird, a rum barrel, cognac barrel. Heck, you could, in theory, take your 85% corn spirit, or maybe even 100% corn spirit, and you can stick it in an ex-Isla barrel, which would be cool. Now, the only corn whiskey I have at the moment is mellow corn, which I'm pretty sure is aged in ex-bourbon barrels. Um, I could be wrong, but just based on the flavor, I would assume so. Um, it's it tends to be sort of shinier and grainier with like some sweetness and like dusty funk. Like it's like a grain silo type sort of flavor. That won't make sense to anybody who's not been inside a grain silo, but it's got grain, corn dust and sweetness, and then whatever you get from the barrel. In this case, with the mellow corn, it's a little bit of vanilla and butterscotch and just a barest hint of char. Um, and it's I think there's lots of room for expression and experimentation within the corn whiskey category, but most people, if they're going to make an American whiskey, they're going to make bourbon or rye, maybe wheat. And not a lot of people think about that corn whiskey category and the sort of freedom that it can give you. I think that that's an open avenue that I wish more people would explore. And certainly, if I had my own distillery, which I likely never will, yeah, I just never will. I mean, period. There's no like, yeah, it's likely that I won't. There's no chance that I will ever have my own distillery. But if I had my own distillery, I'd be doing all sorts of cool stuff with corn whiskey. I would be, you know, buying, like, say, Firkins, which are 10-gallon barrels, 38 liters. And I'd hand them off to local craft breweries and be like, hey, fill that one with porter, that one with an IPA, and that one with, I don't know, dealer's choice. And then, after they've aged their beer in it and decanted it, maybe done a couple of runs to really seep the flavor in there, take it back and fill it with 80% corn spirit, and for 10 gallons, probably let it sit for 6 months, see where it is, and then move on from there. But most of the corn whiskey that's on the market is either in new charred oak casks or it's in ex-bourbon barrels, and there's not a whole lot of like playing around with the massive amount of leeway that the legal description gives you in this case. And I wish I had more corn whiskey, but again, I find it to be kind of a boring category. It's one of those, I can pick up a corn whiskey, or I can pick up another bourbon. And, bourbon has a more interesting flavor profile from the barrel, because usually when the corn whiskey is being aged in ex-bourbon barrels, you've already pulled out most of the vanilla and the char and the barrel tannins, and so what you've got left is much subtler and not as interesting to me. Now, it isn't to say that there isn't good corn whiskey out there. In fact, I'm sure there is. I'm nowhere close to having. I'm nowhere near the point where I have tried a majority of the corn whiskeys on the market. I've had a little bit of the Balcones True Blue. I've had that mellow corn. There's a distillery in Virginia that makes a straight corn whiskey that's pretty good. But they, again, age it in brand new charred oak casks. I've had Platte Valley corn whiskey, and I don't really know anything about it. It was on a list in a plate in a bar, and I tried it, and it was, You might have confused it for bourbon, honestly. And actually, come to think of it, technically, if you take your, say, 85% corn whiskey and age it in a new oak barrel, that's bourbon. Hadn't thought of that. I mean, actually I had, but people don't always use the label that's most accurate for what they produce, strangely enough. But anyway, this week is dry week, sort of smashing into rest of what I've got to take care of. This week is dry week, so no alcohol for me this week, for me anyway. So I'm not reviewing reintroduction. I'm not reviewing one of those this week. Forgot to move the seltzer, so you couldn't see half of them anyway. I'm not reviewing one of those this week. I'm going to hit those next week. I am doing a review this week, but it is not a whiskey or anything alcoholic. And I'm still doing a cocktail video on Friday, a regular Drinking Geeks episode with a non-alcoholic drink, which is all good fun. So, let's see. In the description there will be a link to a Discord community. It is not my Discord community, but it is a whiskey lovers community. It's called the Whiskey Lodge. It's run by a guy named Joe. He's a nice guy. And, it's sort of a place for whiskey people to gather and talk, and it's a real great, wholesome environment. Everybody is pretty friendly. And they're trying to grow their community, so I figured, why not help them out with all 14 of my subscribers, most of whom are already probably members of that Discord. Well, at least 4 of them. Next up, I have a Discord, but to access the Discord, you got to be a Patreon. Now, the Discord is not the only perk of being a Patreon. You also get to vote for what I review. You get a say in what cocktails I make. You get to see everything that I make early, which is good and fun. And let's see. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. It's $1 a month, which works out to $12 a year. But if you are thinking to yourself that you don't feel like spending $12 a year on a YouTube channel, what about $3 once? And you get something for it. You spend $3 once and you can buy yourself That's the Spirit Pot Still sticker from my Etsy shop. It was designed by a friend of mine, Alyssa, from Apricot Studios. There's a link to that in the description down below. So until next time, Stay happy and stay geeks. I don't have a drink, so I can't toast you. Sláinte.